My mother once told me, don't ever marry a man who comes home for lunch. I married one who doesn't ever leave. He can't wait to get to the typewriter. He loves it. Most people I know who are married to writers they push their husbands to the typewriter. But I don't have to do that. I never would anyway.
My day started when I was doing Another World at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Whenever I wake up, I get up as soon as I wake up.
He's a compulsive worker. He really is.
I'd get up on the second floor. My wife would be sleeping. And I'd come up to the third floor, dress, make some coffee, and come up here and certainly be at the typewriter by 4.
And he goes upstairs. And I don't know what he does up there. I can hear that when I wake up in the morning, I can hear the typewriter going.
If I typed faster, I'd write faster, actually, because I can hardly keep up with myself on the typewriter. And it's one of the advantages in writing a soap, because it means you don't have time to think too much. You don't have time to really analyze what you're doing. You go a great deal on impulse, a great deal on instinct about behavior. I think character is story, you see. If you go from character, you always end up with good stories. If you start with story and begin to make your characters fit your story, you usually end up with something that's not very believable. My story is almost always related to interpersonal relationships. The major story on Another World, when I wrote it, was Iris and her father's young wife, Rachel. And that carried us for 4 years, because you can play variations on that. That's a real emotional sandlot you can play anything in.
Procter & Gamble, the sponsors, have quite a bit to say, much more than they'll ever acknowledge.
And it's not that they come out and tell you, you can't do this. It's that they shoot down the ideas that contain the new approaches. For instance, I wanted to do a homosexual story. And I wanted to do it with a sympathetic young boy who had been known to the audience from the time he was born. His parents were major characters on the show. And I wanted to show how parents reacted. I wasn't so much interested in the homosexual story as I was in a father who would say, I won't have a son who's a homosexual. And a mother saying, no matter what he is, he's our son. That's the conflict I wanted. And they agreed to it. And then finally, at the very end, when I was already putting this story into outlines, and the boy was telling his sister that he had found a friend in college and he was having an affair with him, they backed out. For the first 4 years, I did 5 scripts a week that were 15 pages each. The next 4 years, I did 5 scripts a week that were 30 pages each. And then the last 10 weeks, I did 5 scripts a week that were 45 pages each. And that's like writing a full-length play every other day.
When you think that he had something like 54 characters running around up there, it was terribly hard for him, and he got sort of detached from the family. It was as though he was walking around in his own world, in another world, which indeed he was.
And it's a terrible feeling. It's a feeling that you're never free. That if you're walking down the street, you're not thinking, you're not stopping at a shop window and saying, gee, I think I'll buy that for my wife or my daughter. You're saying, that would look nice on Pat. And there's a kind of crossover that's really terrifying if you're spending that much time, as I was by the end of it, because what you realize is that you're being victimized by your imagination. You never get away from it.
Sometimes I would ask him a question and he wouldn't hear me.
And then the fights at the conferences. And it's not worth the fights. And I was beginning to distrust everybody who I worked with, which is a terrible feeling. I didn't trust the producer anymore. I didn't trust the sponsor that I'd got on with all those years. And now, looking back on it, I sense it was more coming out of me than anything they were doing. You know? Although they weren't helping.